Sean Deveney, Sporting News NBA writer. I'm not suggesting that they don't feel, that this is competitive enough for them, but at what point is it not an optimum challenge for them, Sean?
Yeah, well, I mean, they knew what they were getting into when they went and signed Kevin Durant, that they were going to be a team that, should win a championship, probably, the next 2-3 years anyway. So, probably looking at 4 or 5 of these, it was something that the league wasn't all that thrilled about. That obviously they'd like more parity, more competitiveness, more uncertainty, and you get to this time of the year. But here we are. I don't know that that the Warriors, necessarily feel any regret about going out and signing Kevin Durant, but certainly they knew that this is where that all that was going to lead.
Now, if they win this again very easily, a sweep or 4 games to 1, does that potentially alter the decision making of some of these stars?
Yeah, I think it. If I'm Paul George, for instance, LeBron is obviously sort of a separate category. But let's say you're Paul George, and you're thinking about going to LA, going home and trying to build a championship caliber team there. I think that if you're looking at the challenge of the Warriors, you're saying, I don't have a chance. I mean, I've got to get 3 more of me to come to LA in order for that to happen, and that's not going to happen. However, if I opt into my contract and tell the Thunder that I'm going to opt into that final year of my contract, rather than become a free agent this year, same thing that Chris Paul did last year, and then I'll be willing to be traded. Now I can say, okay, trade me to Houston, and that would certainly give the Rockets a chance, or trade me to Cleveland, and that would give the Cavaliers a chance. So yeah, I do think that for an example like that, for a guy like Paul George. If you're interested in playing competitive basketball, if you're interested in competing at this time of year in the next 4 or 5 years, I think that it has to affect the way you're thinking.
What about a Kevin Durant?
I don't think no. I mean, I think he's happy where he is. I think he understands that there's criticism there, but I don't think that there's anything that is going to cause him to pack up and leave. There's a chance maybe one of the other guys, it could be Klay Thompson. He's going to be sort of the next one up that does that. But I couldn't see Kevin Durant deciding, hey, this did what I intended it to do. Won a couple championships. Now I'm out of here. I just don't see that happening.
We're talking with Sean Deveney from the Sporting News, longtime NBA writer. What's your take on Chris Paul's options? I mean, the thought that he wants a max deal. If you're Houston, are you giving him a max deal when he's going to make $40+ million in his late 30s, early 40s?
No, I think he's got to be a little realistic about that, and certainly if Houston says no, or what Houston can do is say, okay, well, go out and find another offer, and we'll see if we can match it or beat it. And I think what Chris Paul would quickly find is that there is no other offer. There's obviously no other team can give him that much money to begin with. But I think just even at the normal max, I don't think that there's a lot of teams that are going to be lining up for Chris Paul, given what his injury history has been and sort of where he is in his career. So if I'm Houston, it's a delicate dance. You don't want to bruise a guy's ego too much, but at the same time, you're trying to put together a championship caliber team here, a team that can legitimately challenge the Warriors, and to give Chris Paul something like 3 or 4 years at $40 million per. That's going to really that's going to severely send you into the luxury tax, and it's just not something I think any reasonable team would do.
Yeah, there's some reports that the Rockets could go after Paul George. Is there a scenario where they could get Paul George, keep Chris Paul, and go after it with a Paul, Harden, and George trio?
Yeah, that's the idea. I think going after Paul George, especially if you can do it through a trade, the reason you would do that is under the presumption that you're keeping Chris Paul and that you've got obviously James Harden is not going anywhere. So you would have those three guys. Now the question would be, what other guys can you afford to keep at that point? At what point will the luxury tax get to be too much? If you want to keep a Trevor Ariza, for instance, that's all of a sudden going to be difficult. And who do you get instead of him if that's how this is going to go? So I think that you probably start though with let's get those starters, and then we'll worry about the role players after that.
Sean, if Boston was to move on from one of their guys, who's the most likely piece from them to get moved if they're looking to upgrade their roster?
Well, probably Rozier. I mean, you've got Marcus Smart as a restricted free agent, so he's probably gone unless something happens with Terry Rozier or something happens where they free up a little cap space. But, if you pay Marcus Smart, then you're starting to look at the luxury tax, not this year, but next year. So that's going to be something that's going to be on their minds. And the owners have said they'd be willing to pay the luxury tax, and I believe that's true. But do you want to pay the luxury tax for Marcus Smart? That's the question, and I'm not sure that they want to. You've got to do a sort of a cost benefit analysis on that, and I'm not sure that Marcus Smart is worth it. So so we'll see what happens with him, what kind of offer he gets. Could wind up signing the qualifying offer, which is just a 1-year deal that is sort of built into the contract, and then it becomes unrestricted next summer. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen, where they just keep Marcus Smart for 1 year. But as far as what they do, I think Terry Rozier is the most likely to be out, just because you're going to get Kyrie Irving back. And even though you're worried about Kyrie Irving's long-term health with that knee, I just don't think that you can start the year telling Terry Rozier you're going to be a 12-minute-a-game player after what he did in the postseason and going back to March. So I think he's the most likely to be on the move. It'll be tough to get what they consider to be a fair deal, but that's certainly where they'd like to start.
Former Cavs GM David Griffin has said that he thinks the Sixers have the leg up, or a leg up, if you will, on LeBron James. He kind of ties Rich Paul, the agent, to his Ben Simmons agent, and we've heard a lot of that, obviously. But do you think any of this Colangelo stuff factors into LeBron, or is that not really going to matter for him?
Well, I mean, I think David's got a dog in this race. I think that David wouldn't mind to seeing Colangelo pushed out, and hey, I'm available, and so they hired David Griffin. So I think he does have a dog in the race there, and he should. I think he'd be LeBron or no LeBron, he's proven himself to be a very good general manager. But B, any advantage you can get to try to bring LeBron to your team, you're going to try to use it. To answer your original question, yes, the Colangelo stuff definitely is sort of clouding the way that free agents in general, certainly LeBron, would look at coming to Philadelphia. And B, I think when you talk to agents and you talk to some players off the record, one thing that kind of factors into all this is, Philadelphia's been sort of weird about how they've handled injuries and sort of the secretiveness, with Embiid, with Markelle Fultz. You put all that together, and I think that there are some players and agents who are, just sort of wary of the franchise in general right now. So, look, if somebody throws enough money at a player, he's probably going to take it and not care about any burner accounts or anything. But for a guy like a LeBron who's going to have choices and whose choices are going to be the difference between the choices is going to be narrow. There's going to be a slim margin between who he picks. Then I do think that's something that's going to factor in.
In this situation, which is bizarre, I guess they're saying there could be some resolution today, potentially, and now there's even some people that think that he could make it through that he could end up remaining as the GM. I mean, it seems that it's changing by the minute whether you think he's going to be gone or not, but he was at a pre-draft meeting workout today with Grayson Allen, so I guess he's continuing business as usual at this point here. But it sounds like the Sixers are kind of going to make Brett Brown more of the front and center guy here, and I wonder, if that's the case, how do you keep Colangelo around with all this hanging around him if you're not even going to really utilize him in the role that he should be utilized in?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's something where it would still be sort of advise and consent from Colangelo if he were to stick around. But you'd have Brett be more of the guy who is out there because you just don't want. There's an embarrassment factor to what's going on, and you don't want to present that embarrassment as sort of the the main face of the franchise as they go through and meet with draft prospects and meet with agents and things like that. But that doesn't mean that Colangelo will necessarily lose power. It's just a matter of who are we putting out there instead of a guy who's got this cloud hanging over him.
Yeah, and we know that that the resolution is taking longer than many people thought, and I guess
I thought this would be the weekend. I did not think that we'd still be talking about it 2-3 days later after the weekend. I really thought this was something they were going to get taken care of quickly.
Yeah, and I guess one question is, I mean, this far in the game, I mean, the draft is coming up in like 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks from now, from Thursday anyway, and do you stay inside the organization, or do you quickly find someone from outside the organization and bring them in and have them, and use all the resources from the previous? It's just a bizarre situation of what's the right way to go about it. Stay in-house and just go through this draft, which is very important, or bring someone from outside the organization in.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously we're looking at 2 weeks until the draft, so you don't have a lot of time to get up to speed. However, when you're drafting where the Sixers are and you understand the roster, most professional NBA guys are going to be able to come in and take over a front office and still be able to make a pretty good pick. I don't think it's necessarily going to be you hire somebody and they're saying, okay, wait, who's Wendell Carter, who's Miles Bridges? Most of these guys know what's up, and they know what the situation is in terms of the draft, in terms of free agency. So yeah, I don't think it would be that hard to get somebody up to speed in terms of just the flat aspect of the roster. There's obviously much more to running an organization than that, but that's actually probably the easier part, is just making those picks and figuring out what you need. But yeah, obviously there's much more that's complex in terms of staff and training staff and coaching staff and analytics and all those things that you need to run a team. But in terms of just the flat aspect of, okay, who are we going after in free agency and who are we going to draft, that's probably the easier part.
They make a decision. They make an announcement on the day of a game.
That would probably, that would be wise, I would think. If they did it at about 5 p.m. today or 5 p.m. Friday, might even be more optimal, especially if they're going to keep Bryan. Then that might be the way to go. Yeah.
Would you be surprised if they keep him?
Yeah, I would. But I like I said, I thought that they would have taken care of it quickly, but I understand why they're not. That this also sends a signal to other GMs, other potential candidates, as they go forward that, hey, look, we're going to give you a fair hearing. We're going to give anything that happens. We're not just going to throw you under the bus. We're going to give you, it sends a signal that hey, look, we're going to treat our employees with a certain level of dignity and to a certain standard. So I understand why they're doing it, as thoroughly as they are. But yeah, even having said that, I'd be surprised if he winds up sticking at San. I really thought by this point Bryan would have just resigned. I really or worked out a mutual deal where he can kind of get some payment and save the franchise the embarrassment of continuing to go through this.
Sean Deveney, NBA writer from the Sporting News. We've got Game 3 tonight right here on 97.3 ESPN. The coverage begins at 8 p.m. Always a pleasure, Sean. Thank you so much.
All right, Mike. Thanks.